All right, welcome everybody. See, my birds just gave a quick flyby at the start there. This is Civic Tech YYC for April 9th here of 2024. Tonight we're looking at VR and AR innovations in Calgary. That's virtual reality and augmented reality. Chace and Brent will be leading a discussion just talking about some of their work in the AR and VR space here within Calgary. Just to get us started, here's a land acknowledgement, and that CivicTech is an organization that resides on the traditional territories of the peoples of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot First Nation tribes of the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations tribes of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, Wesley, and Tsuut'ina First Nation. And this is also homeland to the historic Métis and Métis nations of Alberta. The civic tech movement is a movement focused on the use of technology for public good. We use data to design and address challenges that citizens and governments are facing, help citizens and governments work together to use technology for data and design, pursue opportunities for greater citizen engagement and more effective services, as well as grow engagement and enhance digital services in ways that are more inclusive, responsive, innovative, and citizen-centered. Civic tech is a global movement and it's expanded dramatically over the last 15 years through the help of organizations like Code for All. It's in the US in cities like Chicago, Boston, and New York City that have led the civic tech movement through some important national organizations, including Code for America, the US Digital Service, and 18F. There are other civic tech locations across Canada, and they're all posted on the Code for Canada website. Code for Canada helps us get those organized, and there's also government agencies like the Canadian Digital Service. We launched Civic Tech in Calgary back in 2017 by bringing together people who had an interest in improving their community through technology by leveraging the support of the City of Calgary and the Rainforest Alberta Network. Driving force was to break down the barriers between sector silos and create a space for collaboration, addressing challenges and opportunities citizens and government are facing. And if you see the diagram there, the civic tech community just sits within the areas of like the City of Calgary with the digital strategy. There's a sphere of citizens and government and social innovation, the sphere of technology, industry, alliances, smart cities, and entrepreneurs, startups, research, and education. Uh, and that's my mouse going the wrong direction there. Just some of the major projects we've worked on. There is the ongoing BudLib database management project. Michael's on the call who helps work on that one. We've done blockchain experiments before, testing ideas with blockchain, not just cryptocurrency, actual blockchain tech, as well as one of our successful ones, which is Volley, a local volunteering app started by Alice Lamb. If you want to get involved in volunteering with local organizations, they help out there. We also have helped to start civic user testing groups. They're grassroots groups that facilitate better and more inclusive and accessible usability testing that engages residents in the creation of technology that's meant to serve them. It's a concept that started in Chicago and has spread across to many cities, including Toronto's GRIP program, and is now in the city of Calgary here with Inclusity. So Inclusity Calgary is what we helped to start up. It's a team of technologists, designers, public employees, community organizers, entrepreneurs, policy analysts, and other engaged citizens, all with a shared vision that Calgary can be more accessible city for all. Our mission is to plan, design, and run user testing sessions with an inclusive and representative group of Calgarians to improve the usability of products, services, or products, processes, services, and for teams in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. We're proudly supported by the Calgary Foundation, and we started the organization with our partnership with Calgary UX. Just looking at some of our other partner organizations within the city that we'd like to give a plug for. There is Code for Canada, Calgary UX, Data for Good, Rainforest Alberta, the YYC Data Society, Platform Calgary. There's Immigrant Techies Alberta. Newer one I've added to the list is the Test Tribe. We've got Scott on the call this evening, which I'll probably drop a link for as well, with the OSGeo group, which is great in town. It supports open source geography software. So yeah, a lot of other areas that you can get involved with here in Calgary. And then there are all of our socials. We're on Meetup. We have our website, civictechyyc.ca, and we're at CivicTechYYC on all platforms, now including Threads and X/formerly Twitter we still have, but it is now formerly Twitter and no longer Twitter. So that is my intro deck there for this evening. I'm gonna stop sharing, and I think what I will do is I'll spotlight you to get started there, Brent, and then go ahead and let me know, and I'll add Chace onto the spotlight there.
Thanks, Ross. Welcome, everybody. Looking forward to having a healthy discussion about AR and VR. I suspect many people on the call have been or had the opportunity to dabble in it. It actually started for our co-founders, myself and Elle are on both on the call tonight, and then two others several years ago. And it started with a simple experiment. And it was during the pandemic that we tried a workrooms, meta workrooms, one of the environments experiments where we had full room, 16 on Zoom attending and 16 on VR, and did a post analysis as to the immersive and semi immersive experience. And right from that genesis a couple years ago, through coffee dates most weeks, we call it XR Tech Chat, sometimes with coffee. This year, we started up a social nonprofit. And I think that's what really links in with CivicTechYYC is doing it for social good. And in some of the pre-discussions with Ross, really talked about what our goal is with Ramble XR Foundation. And we are not building environments. We are not competing for the hardware, software side of it, or the build. It's more the introduction to a number of organizations that may never touch it. Just to give you an example, 1 year ago today, our group held multiple sessions with two individuals out of the States, James Hudson, a professor, and Piper Hudson happens to be his spouse. And it was a book they had written on accessibility and inclusion for museums and exhibitions. In really talking about, if anyone remembers, where shopping malls and grocery stores started to do lowered lights and those types of things to make it more accessible for those with either sound or light sensitivity. They looked at it as well. What's the VR experience and how can that enhance the physical experience? So if you're going, I always give the example, if you're going to Drumheller, most students bring home the permission slip to the parents, get that signed off, and then their first experience is when they get off the bus in that environment. And yeah, they've read some books on dinosaurs, but wouldn't it be wonderful if weeks in advance or months in advance they had the ability to experience that environment? And that's really what we looked at. So we brought in individuals who wouldn't normally maybe touch the hardware. So executive director of Arts Commons, from Spark, the Telecenter, from YWCA, some of the social service agencies in Calgary, and gave them the opportunity to experience it. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that revelation in a virtual world. And just one of the social comments from a director at the YWCA was they have clients that they work with, and they come from very dangerous, high emotional environments that they're escaping from. In the VR world, the first thing the director did was create her avatar. And that gave her license, social license to do something under her control. And she goes, wouldn't that be powerful for their clients to also have that control? Create an avatar in which they get to inhabit and then to go into different environments. So I think with that example, it really shows what our goals are, or one of the foundation pillars for our foundation is to break down some of the Hollywood um, images of what VR is. And I mentioned earlier, like, we're not going to become those characters in Wall-E, 300 pounds and laying in a flat bed and have the VR glasses on, whether it's Meta's Oculus glasses or Apple's goggles. That there's so many applications for it. Each of the co-founders come from a different focus. Some of it from the social sciences, some of it, I don't have it here. I was looking for the book. I've taken it somewhere, but it's called The Culture Map. And it's from the university in INSEAD. And Aaron, the professor, talks about expats and people moving between cultures and what that's like, and why someone who's an expert in France and is an A player and is a leader of her team or his team, and then they maybe move over to America, and why they're struggling to be a successful participant, and talk about the nonverbal clues and the verbal clues and how we approach it. I love the question now is, if you've got an avatar that you've created and you're in an environment which is a virtual created environment, you have no clues. You didn't take a plane somewhere around the world. You're now possibly with people. I don't know where everyone's from, even in the Zoom call, but I definitely don't know where they are potentially in a virtual world, any virtual world. And we have had calls with international participants from the UAE, from France, from Europe, from Asia, all around the world. I don't know how they do it with a lag time. I know it's getting really, really good, and there's some special stuff that goes on, but you cannot tell when you're sitting in a room and talking to them. So what does that mean when you are in a business and business meetings, onboarding, and your team is distributed anywhere around the world or around the city, and you can hold these kinds of meetings with full immersion? So you can't see my hands going, but I like to talk with my hands. You see my head nodding a little bit, but it is a wonderful thing when you try it. If anyone's been snorkeling and then you move to scuba diving, when you snorkel and you get that little bit of that water in your mouth, and you go, ugh, and you're kind of coughing it up, and then you scuba dive for the first time and you go down a couple feet and you can still breathe. I would suggest that the immersion part of the virtual environments with goggles is about the same. It is spectacular. So just to give you some other examples, and again, from a civic point of view, if you look at, say, Jasmine Clardy's, like the vibrant, the lobby fest that they had, and some of the work she does with spaces. We held last August in Remio. It's one of the environments, the Calgary Poet Laureate. And I always get a name backwards. It's Brewster. Anyway, I got it backwards. Sorry. I will put it in the chat. So he gave us poetry reading in VR. He had never done that before. And so from a culture point of view, isn't it amazing that he was up in an amphitheater with the Aurora Borealis above? That was the virtual environment we were in. And he was fully expressive. And all of us sitting in the audience, it was amazing to see that happen. It does not, and I'll say this once, and I'll probably say it a couple times later, replicate an in-person environment. So it's not the same as going to downtown to one of the theaters and seeing it live. Absolutely. However, when it's a snowstorm outside and none of us want to really drive in that snowstorm and get wet and mucky and everything else, what a wonderful thing. So we do have a website, RamblexR, and I believe we've got some of the videos, including some of his readings, some of his spoken words up on there. It just gives an idea of the power of it. Just to get a short rundown of a couple more examples, we did a panel with Canadian Blockchain Consortium, just talking about the power of VR and AR and where we're going. One of the key elements out of that, and we talked about it for a few minutes before, was how do you access, whether it be Web3, whether it be the future, like the communication amongst humans is a basic need. The technology is going to change. Some point we might get to Star Trek and the holodeck. Really cool, where you've got safety protocols in place and all of the guardrails there, but you're totally immersed in that environment. We're progressing maybe along that path, but wouldn't it be neat if the goggles just disappeared? And there's lots of different things to show that possible. We do lots of discovery days as well. So we were at Cybera has their cyber conference every fall. We were out there for the discovery day. We did it with the Open Learning Lab. We held, the four of us co-founders were the primary or participated with a few others and held the first AW night. That's augmented world reality or experience. And there's a link that we'll put in the chat as well with regards to that. So we've got Alberta set up. We're looking forward to hosting, I believe, next month in Edmonton, and then followed by some other cities as well. And tomorrow, if anyone has access to downtown, we'll be holding 6 sessions, 3 in the afternoon and 3 in the early evening at the Open Learning Lab. And it is education in a digital world. And so we have Braden, who works with a couple of the schools in Calgary, fresh off going to all of the teacher conventions. We've got him for the day from noon till about 8 p.m. tomorrow. And you actually get a chance to put on the VR glasses, be a student, and experience what it's like. And he's going to actually, for the first time ever, so you've heard it here, he just told me an hour or two ago, they have a new deployment. So you will be underwater in one of the experiences. So pretty cool. So yeah, those are a couple of the activities just to give some business cases, and lots more would share, but I'll turn it over to Chace.
All right. So yeah, good evening, folks. I'm going to share my screen here. So for those that don't know me, my name is Chace Kostelny. So I'm an IT project manager with the City of Calgary in the Smart Cities team. You can see that I initially kind of presented this with Brent as well as in the Tech Community Coffee Day. So I'm just going to go through some of the AR VR experimentation that we've been doing within the City of Calgary. I've been in the Smart Cities team for about 8 months, give or take, so fairly new to the team and kind of pushing an AR VR initiative. So some of the things I'll quickly go over is how we're kind of using virtual reality to help city teams envision Calgary's future. I'll talk a little bit about how we're leveraging the Magic Leap 2 augmented reality headset for potential use with emergency services, and how we're leveraging virtual reality for some training implications, such as Calgary Fire VR training, for example, and a new initiative that we are hopefully going to be piloting with our partners with Denver Data here in Calgary, and spinning up an instance of the NVIDIA Omniverse. So I want to start off with a quote that resonated with me last year when I attended an Augmented Summit conference in Houston. So the quote is, people didn't want a drill, they needed a hole. So why this kind of resonated with me was we really want to focus on the solution to an actual business problem, or business problems that could exist within our business partners within the city, rather than just focusing on, say, like the latest and greatest kind of just shiny object and focusing on that. We really want to make sure that when we are leveraging augmented reality or VR, that we are focusing on either creating like an efficiency within a business unit, solving business problems, saving costs or money, things of that nature. So that quote really resonated with me. So when it comes to using virtual reality to envision Calgary's future, one of the things that we are kind of on the tail end here of a pilot project with a wide assortment of partners that we're working with. So in IT, we've been partnering up with planning and development, local area planning, city and regional planning, and collaboration, analytics, and innovation. We're testing how virtual reality can be used to help better inform the planning process. So traditionally, planning relied quite heavily on things like two-dimensional maps or blueprints and computer simulations to envision how communities could evolve, but those methods really didn't help provide a true sense of kind of the final built environment and engage people in a meaningful way. So here, this is kind of just strictly like a demo data that we've kind of developed. So this would kind of give you perspective of a planner kind of taking a look at a city block of how it would look like today, being able to kind of stand at that street level immersive view. You can see some vehicles, you can see some existing digital twin models that we have within the city of Calgary. And leveraging virtual reality, we can do something like this, where we can kind of populate what a potential new development would look like, and help planners really get that immersive feel and feel what that potential impact of that new development would be if they were to build something within a city block or a given community. So the potential of using something like this, so this, what we're looking at here, is leveraging a product called Esri 360 VR. So we can create different camera angles, different perspectives. We can set up different scenarios based on the planner's needs, depending on the level of immersion or the different perspective that would help them make better decisions in the planning process. So this perspective here kind of gives you more of a, don't want to say a bird's eye view, but a higher level perspective of how that building would potentially look like in a given community. This perspective here really helps our planners see things like the shadow impact of potential new developments. So if we put up like a high-rise building like you see here, is that going to, put the adjacent buildings in a shadow for the majority of the day, which is obviously something that isn't a positive. We want to make sure that we're not putting people in a shadow throughout the whole amount of day. Similar, if we put it like adjacent to a park or other kind of areas, we want to make sure that this building isn't going to have that kind of negative impact on a given community. Next up, we've got augmented reality for emergency services. So this is leveraging the Magic Leap 2 that we recently implemented within our team. So this helps bring a team of experts together to address one of the most dangerous and costly aspects, which of course is climate change. And in this particular scenario would be something like an extreme fire event, like wildfires, for example. So as we well know, last year during the summer, we've seen quite an extensive amount of wildfires and forest fires and grass fires that have come across with the climate and change that we're seeing as climate change has impacted us. So this gives us the ability to see things like live camera feeds from like our fire crew on the ground. We can pull in things like live body cam feeds from a crew on the ground, for example, that are currently fighting the wildfire, for example. We can do things like dashboarding, see things like barometric pressure, the wind speed and how that's affecting the wildfire in real time. We can enable some layers like wind direction, because as we know, firefighters typically have to deal with that dynamic change of wind when they're on the ground. So if the wind changes in real time, that could put them in potential hazardous situations. We can see the smoke direction, how that is being impacted, things like fuel, the fire zone, or roads as well. So this view just kind of gives you that perspective where the fire is kind of going. Those arrow directions kind of give you that wind direction and the general path of which the fire is going. Those icons are basically clickable, so you can click on those icons and get the different live camera feeds from the ground crew that are fighting that fire in real time. We also have that ability, as you can see here, to see things like helicopters that are circling the area in real time or dumping water. We can get information like their water reserve, their tank reserves in real time. We can also pull the live footage from the helicopters and what they see from their perspective from that fire as well. Going into VR training. So we were recently approached by Calgary Fire to potentially explore helping train our firefighters and future recruits in different scenarios that they might have to face fighting fires, whether it be anything from flood scenarios to a large-scale building being on fire or things of that scenario. We've been asked to do things like, putting potential recruits in a VR immersion room and immersing them with like 360 VR camera to give them that really genuine feel of what it's like to be a firefighter, what it's like to be in like a confined space or dealing with having to climb up a ladder, 5, 10 stories and dealing with extreme heights. So this allows them to practice decision-making, problem-solving, and appropriate behaviors in a safe and controlled environment, and it helps them train for specific situations, such as structure fires or hazardous materials, for example. So one of the benefits, and I guess a multitude of benefits that we've come across when it comes to VR training, one of the main ones is that it appeals to millennial workforce. So 33% of employees in the workforce in the world are millennials. As we know, millennials, they want things like technology and modern technology. They're visual learners, and they typically have difficulty retaining information. 50% of those projects that get implemented are typically from research and development from our customers that visit a version of an immersion lab. So in our case, with the Smart Cities team, we're currently underway constructing what's called the Technology Integration Center, which is a flavor of an immersion lab facility. So that helps enhance research and development. So that allows us to give our partners and business units the ability to come into a safe environment that's isolated from our corporate network and explore and experiment with new technology that helps inform their investment decisions, and hopefully they'll see some of the benefits of this and want to implement it in an operational sense. When it comes to reinforcing these learning corrections, training in VR is typically 4 times faster than in a given just a normal classroom environment. So that learning is quite immersive. It helps increase things like muscle memory. People are emotionally connected to the training material. We've seen things as simple as like fast food restaurants even are leveraging things like VR training on training their staff of how to do things like creating, just putting milkshakes and burgers together, and it helps them develop that muscle memory and training them how to do that on a regular basis. It also helps reduce defects. So we found that typically with VR training, it reduces about 70% of defects. We've seen that in especially like the airline industry. Boeing and Delta have been using VR training for their stewardess and their airline attendants, and when they're building their planes and testing things out, they've indicated that it's helped significantly in reducing defects, even on producing their aircrafts, for example. When it comes to NVIDIA Omniverse, this is something that's relatively brand new, both for the city of Calgary, but it's also very brand new to NVIDIA themselves. This is something that is still in the infancy stage for NVIDIA. It's kind of in the beta stage for them. So we will be hopefully spinning an instance of this up in April, hopefully by the end of the month. We want to hopefully try and leverage this for virtual reality and artificial intelligence. So where this provides a benefit is we have the benefit of leveraging NVIDIA's graphic processors within the cloud. So we don't have to do things like spending a large amount of money on intensive high-level, GPUs. We don't want to have to spend like $10,000 or higher on super intensive GPUs. We can leverage NVIDIA's GPUs in the cloud to do things like full ray tracing, photorealistic, virtual reality. And we can also do things like streaming VR and AR to headsets directly from what they call the Cloud XR apps. So for things like Calgary Fire, for example, we can stream their training scenarios directly from a server to their headsets without actually having to physically be there or physically install something on headsets. We can just stream that directly to their headsets and allow them to run training scenarios. Where the ray tracing is extremely helpful are things where we want to create a very beneficial and positive user experience. So I'm sure, as you all know, with virtual reality, there's things that people experience where people can get nauseous or they get motion sickness and things like that. And where that happens is where, shadows and the level of quality of the VR kind of throws your eyes and your brain off in a virtual reality experience and gives you a bit of nausea. Not for everyone. Not everyone is impacted by that, but for some folks that is definitely a reality where they just aren't comfortable in that scenario. They get, seasickness. They have to take the headset off. where ray tracing really provides that benefit is that it provides such a level of photorealism and immersion that the quality is so high that your brain just sees it as almost just a high quality enough that you don't really experience that. You get the real life shadows, the real life reflections and glass textures that you're not going to typically get that nausea or seasickness to provide a positive experience. When it comes to artificial intelligence, this is going to be kind of our first kick at the can of the NVIDIA Omniverse. So we're going to be hopefully helping our artificial intelligence team to do synthetic data training in order to cut down some of the time and costs when it comes to training artificial intelligence. So right now, we're doing things like exploring, like leveraging camera data in real time to identify defects in things like fences, for example. Like if a fence is broken, we can identify that through artificial intelligence, or things like potholes. But that's very costly. It's very it takes a lot of time to train that data. Artificial intelligence also has some difficulty depending on the camera angles that it detects. If there's a certain angle that it's looking at a fence, it can't really determine if there's a defect or if a fence is broken. So where synthetic data comes into play is that we can basically work with like CAD designers, generate a 3D model of like a fence or a road, and we can train artificial intelligence on kind of artificial defects rather than having to rely on like real world cameras or real world images or real world data. And that helps that team train artificial intelligence on synthetic data. So that really helps them generate diverse data sets and varying parameters and identifying things like defects or being able to adjust ambient lighting and speed up the model training and iterations of those kind of models. So the workflow for that, like I said, you generally kind of start with, the CAD and the textures, and you're importing the data. You work with a CAD designer. You kind of build a scene that you want to train the AI off of. And then that gives you the ability to kind of randomize that domain. You can do things like switching up the lighting. You can switch up location, switch up materials. You can bring in sensors into play. You can generate the data from that and then train and validate the AI off of that. Something else that we're looking at exploring in the future is working with our folks in CAI, the Corporate Analytics and Innovation team. So they have a product called City Engine. We also want to leverage USD in the Omniverse. So again, this allows us to really leverage those GPUs in the cloud and bring in that suite of 3D applications with the Esri ArcGIS platform. Leveraging that USD, which is a state-of-the-art file format, to transport resulting city models, and really bring in that high-end visualization and overall scene assembly of like a city model. So instead of like what I showed earlier, like the 3D models right now are quite just black and white, kind of grayscale. They have no texture, no details. We really want to help our folks in CI get to a level of detail and quality with the 3D models like you see here, where you've got trees, you've got texture, and you've got that level of detail to really make data-driven and informed decisions when it comes to things like urban planning and design. So here is an example, like I said, that we have, like this is our current kind of digital twin, our current model that we have throughout the whole city. So all of our buildings in the city of Calgary are currently modeled in 3D, but like I said, they're 3D. They've got some basic texture, some basic qualities, but we really want to get them to a point where we can do some initial exports from like City Engine into Omniverse, work with our folks in CAI, get that textures, the renders, the colors put into play. We can add some details, and we can also live synchronize that as well. So if we are doing any kind of demonstrations, anything that we do in real time in that environment, if we want to adjust the building in real time, add a floor, make it bigger, make it smaller, that will live synchronize and show up in the Omniverse in real time and help informed decisions in that presentation or that demonstration. So as we go through, you can see like we are hopefully going to get to a point where we can get, better shadow details, better glass reflections. We can leverage things like even doing wind studies, for example, downtown. So if we are thinking of maybe putting a large scale building downtown, we can use the Omniverse to do things like sun studies, adjust clouds, adjust where the sun is located, and even see how that would impact like wind direction downtown. So we're making sure that we're not putting certain areas in like a wind tunnel, or that new building is going to impact wind in a negative fashion. So some of the key learnings so far that we've kind of learned through some of these pilots and experiments is that we need to create demos and leverage champions within our business units and our partners. Those champions really need to be lower than the overall decision makers, because they're the ones that are going to be excited, they're invested, they're the ones that are going to help convince those decision makers that this is a direction that we need to get into. Those are the people that we really need to get the headset on. We need to work up to those decision makers and build up that excitement and momentum from the bottom up. Demos really don't need to be big, but they do have to resonate. So we really don't want to dismiss the power of, I guess, what you could call storytelling. So we really want to make sure that even if the demo is small, that it's going to tell the appropriate story and show that it's going to provide that value and that benefit and those ROIs back to the business. That's going to create efficiencies, reduce costs, and ultimately provide benefits that's going to resonate back to citizens. As I alluded to earlier, we really want to focus on the user experience, and that's because people really remember how they feel when they first experience something like this. Those positive experiences ultimately lead to the buy-in at the end of the day. So that comes back to, like I said, with like the nausea and that motion sickness. We really want to make sure that we make this as positive as possible, so that we can get that positive buy-in. 3D scanning with iPhones is certainly viable for small scales. So where that comes into play, for example, is that we're currently working with our folks in transit to do things like LiDAR scanning for 3D modeling and importing those models into a VR or AR demonstration. We're also looking at doing things like with our Living Labs group, for example, using our iPhones to scan businesses on the external side, and being able to do things like 3D printing, like wheelchair accessible ramps based on that LiDAR scan of the 3D model, or things like signage that incorporate Braille, and even things like being able to incorporate those models into like concrete 3D printing for like roads and road blockers and things like that. People are self-conscious about technologies. So not everyone is tech savvy. Not everyone has played with VR. Not everyone is used to VR, for example. So we've definitely seen where instances where people put on headsets and sometimes they become very self-conscious because they aren't as tech savvy as others. And they sometimes feel maybe nervous or apprehensive to provide certain feedback or some input, because they don't want to come across as, not as tech savvy as others, for example. So we really want to make sure that we are making everyone feel included, and we want to make sure that we're inclusive and that we're making everyone feel comfortable, and we are allowing everyone to really get incorporated with this and feel comfortable in providing feedback from across the board. Failure is a good way to learn and is iterative. So we really want to make sure that failure, if we do a pilot, for example, failure isn't the end game here. We really want to use that as a learning opportunity. Take those learnings back, make some adjustments, try it again, and just make sure that that's an iterative process so that we come up with a quality product at the end of the day. So not all projects are going to be successful, but failure is just as good, because it provides us that ability to take feedback, do some learning, make some iterations, incorporate some some additions, and then just keep iterating until we come up with something that works for everybody. We also really want to focus on making sure that we make it very clear that these type of technologies are tools and they're not job replacements. And we've heard that from a lot of our partners. We've seen people that are a bit of apprehensive, say, on things like artificial intelligence, where people have a bit of apprehensiveness and fear that, you know, artificial intelligence is going to replace jobs, or we're going to, you know, potentially lay people off because artificial intelligence is going to replace staff. That's not the case at all. If anything, this is an ability for us to upskill staff, train them, get them comfortable with the technology, and make them quite aware that this is a tool that's going to enhance their job and take some of those maybe tedious aspects of their job off their plate so they can focus on other things and not worry that this is going to be a job replacement. That's not the case here at all. 50% of professionals in the workforce indicate that a good idea will be stunted by things like bureaucracy or abandoned by the creator, or has a better chance of finding its way to success outside the organization rather than within it. So this is one of the big benefits of something like the Technology Integration Center that I alluded to earlier. So we certainly don't want this to be the case. We want to provide a safe and open environment where people can come in to, like, the Technology Integration Center. They can experiment with new technology. They're not going to be blocked by red tape or things like corporate security saying, hey, we can't put headsets on a network because of security reasons. So this gives them that ability to come into an isolated environment, test things safely, make informed decisions and informed investments decisions, and decide whether or not this is going to provide a big enough benefit to their business that they want to make that investment and incorporate it into their daily operational work. Turning down ideas is a way to help identify ideas that need further development. So this is extremely key because we really want to make people feel comfortable enough that if we do turn down an idea, it's not to say that it's not a good idea or that it's not viable. It's just that it may just need to be further fleshed out, or we need to work with them more closely to further refine the idea so that we can come up with a really solid pilot, come up with an ability to really flesh out those requirements and come up with a lessons learned at the end of the pilot to really help inform those businesses and our partners what those positive benefits are going to be back to their business. So turning down ideas initially is certainly not us telling someone, hey, we're not going to explore this. It's just an opportunity to sit down with these partners and these people and help them flesh it out further so that we can really come up with a really solid pilot to move forward. And that's pretty much what I've got. And this QR code will allow you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I do my best to do posts on a regular basis of a lot of the innovative work that we're exploring in the city. So I continually try and provide some updates. And yeah, you can provide some feedback on my LinkedIn as well. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Chace. Thank you, Brent. We'll open it up kind of for general discussion at the moment. So if anybody has a question, they can raise their hand, or if you want to drop it in chat as well, I can say it out anonymously for you. I'll also make sure to remove Chace just from Spotlight there, so I'm more in Spotlight there as well. I did want to ask one thing that kind of stood out for me on the presentation, Chace. So they're now taking things that are basically already in a 3D modeled environment, marking them up and making those have errors on them, and then using those virtual models to train models to detect anomalies in the real world.
You're referring to that synthetic data training, right?
Yeah, the synthetic
AI?
data training. Yeah.
Yeah, so so that where we're trying to go with this is, like, basically we will have the ability to develop 3D models of things that we want to train AI on, and you can go into that model. It could be something as simple as, like, hey, we want to take a 3D model of like one of our fleet vehicles in the city and, mark it up with some scratches. And we want to train AI on, hey, this vehicle is scratched up. Or like I said, things like generating a 3D model of a chain link fence or a stone fence or things like that. Potholes in roads, for example, and just dynamically put different types of potholes, big, small, different shapes and sizes, and dynamically train AI on that rather than trying to find that data in real life, like going out to the city and trying to find a real life pothole to train this model on, or leveraging camera data, because you're not going to always be able to find those different scenarios in real life. So this helps our AI team to be able to dynamically train that data on different scenarios without having to take up all that time to try and find real world examples or deal with scenarios where AI has difficulty with different angles or camera angles where it just fails because it just can't determine that, right? So this helps with synthetic data to help cut down some of those costs and time to train AI on those kind of things.
Okay. Yeah. I see. I'll put it in a comment about potholes are not hard to find, but I was thinking, what about sinkholes? Like if you have a giant sinkhole suddenly in the middle of the city, how often does that normally happen in cities? Not very often. But in this situation, then you could feasibly take the rough size and delineation of that, make a virtual representation of it, drop it in Calgary somewhere, and then train that virtual model on that virtual sinkhole that you've created. So I'm thinking of like those fringe use cases, because yeah, to your point, like there are a lot of potholes around and the snow ends up melting and then they're there. But what do you do for the potholes that there is not a large data set for that we have to figure out how to fix? Like there's one near my house, water main broke. And not only is it just potholes, like this entire area underneath the sidewalk is just gone because it's from a dirt alley. And there's a pothole on one side and a pothole on the other side, and the concrete sidewalk is still going over it. And it's this unique space of like, okay, does the model know that there's that giant void, or does it think that there's two separate holes that are there? Whereas I'm imagining like if you're modeling that in 3D, you can train it for, yes, there's like solid concrete that goes over this thing, and maybe it can learn that with that unique space. Cool.
Yep.
Mike put a question in chat here talking about you mentioned addressing nausea, but has there been considerations for eye fatigue or potential damages to the eyes due to prolonged use of the headset?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, there's nothing really that we can do through like scene generation or even with that level of detail quality to alleviate those kind of things. That's just one of those cases where you just need to listen to your body, I guess. So, I mean, if you're going to put on a headset for a certain amount of time, you just got to, only put it on for an hour or two. If you feel yourself get fatigued, put the headset off. So the benefit of like that 360 VR that I showed earlier is that it doesn't require a headset to get that level of detail or immersion. So we can blow that up in like a full screen view for our planners. They could just look at that on their computer screen and still make those informed decisions without needing a headset. So if they want to put on a headset initially for 30 minutes or an hour and get that level of immersion initially, and then take it off and then just look at their computer screen and still flip through some of the scenes, they have the ability to do that without impacting their eye fatigue or anything like that.
Yeah. Brent, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's exemplary. Like we've faced this as humans for anything, right? So repetitive strain injury is not new, and I would put this in that same category. So if you're working in a factory and you're doing the same motion over and over, same thing. My dad was a draftsperson and used to spend lots of hours out of his 37 and a half per week, spending time looking at detailed drawings and stereographic glasses and stuff like that. They were mandated that you had to have those wrist breaks, like Chace mentioned, right? And I think that's the same thing here. The technology will get better, the fidelity will get that, the dots per inch, if you want to call it that, will get better, no doubt. But like any muscle use, you have to be careful of what your consistent use of that is. So the technology is not going to solve it. It's up to us to moderate our use of it.
I think talking from my own personal experience, it's gotten a lot easier using VR headsets now than it used to. So I tried the original Oculus when it first came out, and it was kind of wonky and janky. I ended up traveling, and a friend of a friend ended up having one of the later models, and it got a little bit better. And I tried Beat Saber with it, and it was relatively smooth. I have a PlayStation VR for the PlayStation 4, which works okay, but not everybody's necessarily comfortable with that, depending on the games. But I think now there's two things that I've really noticed that have made it better for me using it for prolonged periods. And this is coming from somebody who's, I don't regularly game in VR, but when I have done VR gaming sessions, especially sitting down versus standing up, I've gone for a number of hours, but like standing up ends up being more tiring. So there's other elements that impact your body. But from the headset side, the resolution, to your point, Brent, like it's gotten better. I even noticed between the Oculus Pro 2 and or the Quest Pro 2 and the Quest Pro 3, or not the Pro 3 because there's no Pro 3 model, it's just the Quest 3. Yeah, you've got yours in the background there, Brent. It's
Yep.
a higher resolution and it's smoother and you're noticing less of a time delay and more of that immersion, and even you can get different lens attachments now that adapt to your prescription when you're using the headset. So there's a lot of these measures that are being added into the headset to help with that prolonged use and make it more comfortable. But I find people will hit more of that psychological and body feeling limit before there is anything else with the interactions that I've really noticed on it. And it really depends on the technology too. To your point, Chase, like you were talking about the Magic Leap, and the Magic Leap's a little different where it's an augmented reality glasses system where you're still seeing the real world through the lenses. It's not a system that's pulling you away and just putting a screen in front of your eyes. I think with Apple's Vision Pro, that's one thing that people don't realize with it is there's a little bit of that time delay in the cameras on the outside that are seeing what's going on and then rebroadcasting that versus something that's designed to mix with natural light. And we're seeing kind of this mix of there's the VR technology that has an AR element where it can pull from that external camera and maybe do some overlay, but it's predominantly an immersive device versus the augmented device, which is designed to really put things over top of the real world. And we're seeing more of the augmented tech that's true augmented tech, I think, coming into realization now than we have previously. So it really depends on what you're engaging with. But I think to your point too, it depends on what your eyes are, depends on what you're
I think one of the points you're making there, Ross, and it's anyone that's been on that multi-hour highway drive, and then you come to the first stoplight,
hmm
feel that sense of momentum. You do get some of that with the VR. You think you've been moving,
Yeah.
and possibly you've been standing and moving a little bit, but there is that brain disconnect as well a little bit too, which definitely has a potential to cause the fatigue too. Al mentioned in the chat too. I wanted to, if you wanted to unmute or us talk about the use case of just if you love your big screen monitors and you don't have enough of them available, there is one of the environments called Immersed, and you can have a 180 view and start popping up as many.
Yeah, actually, you get it's a full 360 VR experience. So you can have up to 5 screens as big as you want. And it also supports sort of like a movie mode where you can watch like IMAX size movies in your house. And the link I put there was to their new visor uh, goggle or sunglasses thingies that they're making that they're about to launch, and they have two 4K OLED monitors in them. So they're like, I don't think there's anybody who's got anything that high resolution. And the beauty of OLED is blacks are actually black. But we have Meta Quest 3s, and we play in or we go in immersed, or at least I do. I work in immersed with like 3 huge screens that basically just wrap around my head, and it really helps with your position of your body, and you don't get neck fatigue from looking down at your laptop and stuff like that. So
hmm
I was trying to, well, I'm successfully trying to get them at work because we have, our policy is you get a laptop and 2 monitors, and so you can take 1 monitor home and have 1 monitor at work, or you can have 2 monitors at work, and then when they go home they're working on their little laptop screens. So it'd be nice to say, well, you don't get any monitors. Here's some glasses you can put on. And then whether you're in a coffee shop or on a plane or whatever, you got 5 huge screens that you're working on. So I'm pretty excited about that technology, and it's actually a great experience. The using the MetaQuest headset gets a little heavy after a couple hours, but these new visor glasses are going to be quite the breakthrough. Sorry, I got rambling.
No worries, Brent. You brought in Al, so we're good.
One of the concepts that Al brought up too, and I don't know if anyone remembers the security screens using your laptop on a plane or in a coffee shop or whatever, so you can't see from the sides on your laptop. The immersed environment, if you're wearing the goggles, is your environment. So you can see those big screens, and no one else can see those. So I want to make it well on the screen.
I've got a pair of glasses like that, but they're a lot more basic. They're just like TCL heads-up display glasses. They're Nextwear line, and it's just a display with a Type-C port. Like it's not augmented reality, it's not VR. It's just a semi-transparent display with a little piece. And I've plugged that into my phone, and then I get a full desktop display when I'm plugged into my phone. Depending on where I am, my work laptop has a Type-C port on it with the display output, so I just plug it into the work laptop. So to your point, like if you're working on anything private, it really works nicely to be able to have that literal privacy screen instead of those crazy privacy screens where you can see it at a specific angle, and if there's somebody straight behind you, they can see what your phone or your screen is. I think the one question I want to ask, and there was a comment in chat about Mike having a Quest 2 and a PlayStation VR and getting uncomfortable after about 20 minutes of use. And Al, you're talking about using multiple screens and connecting your monitors. I have multiple screens here, but I similarly can't use the headset for more than about a half hour when I'm using those types of modes. Like I find I can game longer than working on virtual screens and working on an environment. And usually when I am gaming that long, it's when I'm sitting down, so I don't have the nausea. How long are you able to do it when you're using it for that sort of virtual work?
I've been able to go for 3 hours straight. I usually have battery dying long before I have issues with it. Gets a little uncomfortable in your face, but I don't get eye fatigue. And I'm not sure if it's because the MetaQuest 3 has really good quality optics, but yeah, I haven't had any trouble with that. Just the weight of it is really the main problem.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead, Scott.
do you find that you don't need you still need your glasses inside the visor, or is there some way to make the display take care of that for you?
I only use these for reading and looking at my computer screen, so I don't wear them when I'm using my headset, but you can get prescription lenses for your headset if you want.
Okay.
You can calibrate the lenses a little bit. So in most of the headsets, you can move them side to side. Some of the headsets have little wheels. I've seen this even for the heads-up display glasses now, where you just move the wheels and you can kind of modify the prescription a little bit. That's coming out a lot more commonly. There's magnetic lenses that you can put in that are prescription. Depending on the company, there are companies out there that are now making prescription lenses, depending on what headset you want to put them into. So there's a lot more options for people who do have and need that vision correction when they're using them.
Neat. Thanks.
Brent, you
Just
got your
one
headset
throw as
there?
well. Yeah. One of the things that a lot of people who do use it a little bit more, you'll get a aftermarket, call it, rather than the straps that come with it. It balances a lot better if you get one with the extended batteries. They tend to go on the back, which then balances it again as well. So there's lots of different forms. Also, we have a slightly different one as well. So that gives you a little bit more, so the weight's not sitting, say, on your nose or your forehead, which
Right.
gives you a little bit more relief that way as well. But it is
Yeah.
still a good consideration.
I've noticed that when using the headset too. I haven't seen one of the larger battery packs like that on the Quest 3s yet, but trying the Quest Pro 2s, they have like similar sort of thing, battery in the back, and it makes such a difference on your head and your neck strain. That's one thing when I was checking the reviews on the Apple Vision Pro, and I haven't used that one myself, but it's very heavy aluminum body just at the front of your face, and there's no counterweight at the back. So then that strain ends up really showing on your neck after a little while. So it's probably one of those considerations that'll get better with the hardware, is the front end probably gets lighter and more compact, and then they figure out weight distribution.
You're just working on the first step, Ross, towards being a Blue Angel, because they go through that because of the high G forces. So you're just working your front neck muscle. You just have to tighten it up so that you're on that path.
Okay. Specialty training. I'm just thinking from the accessibility side of like, we don't want to put too much strain on people who aren't in the training.
Recognize, I mean, what, five senses, right? And so we're talking about two primary ones, vision and sound. Yes, there's some hypothesis about, smell and taste and working on those, and Hollywood has gone into those areas, and touch even. But it is true, right? It's centers around those two. So from an accessibility and inclusion point of view, it still has that as being something to consider for sure.
There's one aspect that actually comes to mind that I'd like to talk about, which is the controller aspect for the headsets and how people interface with them. So we talk about the vision and how we're seeing it. How is it for people when they're interacting with the headsets in terms of controller options? Like I see there's the Quest that has its two controllers with it there that people can use. I've seen things with Apple's Vision headset where they're trying to go controllerless for the most part, where people can move things with their hands and hand tracking, but it's kind of lacking there. And some people can connect keyboards and stuff to it. What sort of controllers are you noticing that you're using? Can you connect more controllers to these devices? Are there some assistive controllers out there at the moment that you know of for people who might be wheelchair bound using headsets?
Depending on the app, like for example, if you're in Meta Horizon workrooms having a meeting, almost everybody puts their controllers down and then recognizes their hands, and then you can operate with just your hands on most of the stuff. The video games and stuff like that, you require the controllers because you need really fine, accurate control. The Immersed app that I was talking about that I use quite a bit, I put the controllers down. They have this thing where you tap the controllers together and then put them down, and then it starts recognizing your hands. And then you can, you get like a little window to see your keyboard and your mouse so that you can keep working as normal. And you just turn your hand over, and then a menu pops up, and then you can just touch things with your finger, and it recognizes it quite well. Depends on a lot of things, like do you have good lighting in your room and stuff like that. But I find the controllers are dependent on the application you're using.
And as an extension of that, we had a session last fall, and it's XRVR in energy. And we had Lloydminster, I think, was the city that the one company came from, but they've got the haptic gloves. And so when you're doing a lot of the activity, you can put on these gloves and get feedback. And for example, you think of like a surgeon using surgical scalpels or tools and stuff like that, you can actually get accurate feedback. If you're working on any type of physical elements, they can give pressure feedback. But they are, I mean, early days still, I'll call it. Huge advances, I'm sure, will still to come. But it is amazing what we can simulate with all of the senses.
Very cool. What do those gloves work with, like platform wise, right now?
Good question. I have to look back, find the company, and I'll post that hopefully in the meeting notes.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious if that's like specific to PC or if you can somehow pair that to the Quest headset there. Huh, interesting.
I think like anything, right? Whether you're talking gaming computers of decades ago or hardware and software today, we will continue to flexibility versus open, right? You're going to get a lot of that, even more so than just what your connections for a computer are. What type of technology do you have? What's the richness of that data stream? How do you capture it? How do you translate it? We're going to go through many evolutions still.
Jeff, you got your hand up there.
Yeah. Thanks for the presentations. They're just great. It's really nice to see the sort of the practical applications and sort of the emerging applications in the context of the city and civic applications. I'm wondering, have you guys seen any applications in the nonprofit social sector? And would anticipate, it's probably behind like it usually is when we talk about data or analytics or AI and most of these emerging technologies, but any ways that you could see that we could help influence or accelerate the use of AR, VR, for social good purposes?
If I may start, Chase, I would go to a social agency that works with individuals at risk, and when they go in, they often the counselors or the individuals will often take them on a real world trip throughout the city of Calgary when looking for new accommodations. And so they take a day or a couple days and they travel to walk up and they travel to a standalone house and they talk about, oh, there's the tree cover and this is what it looks like and look out for these risks. They looked at just using VR glasses and they said, all of a sudden we can put, give that virtual example like Chace was of environments. Here's too much tree cover. Here's not good visibility. Here's an issue because your front door is right on the sidewalk. All identifying risks, right? Just for that one situation. So they would be able to take multiple individuals through those scenarios. A second scenario that fell out of that as well is how you handle situations. And so there's a lot of scenario type things, when voices get raised and how you respond to situations. They have a situation right now where their counselors are actually the ones doing the acting of a certain personality type, someone who's aggressive, someone who's very expressive. And they have trouble because their clients now cannot disassociate with those individuals when they see them in the hall in their environment. So it's kind of unfortunate, but now what they're able to do in the VR environment is they actually use people from across Canada. And those are now the people that they're interacting with. They can recreate the whole scenario in that. Another situation, we just met with Unison and social isolation, seniors, the ability to connect. In fact, if you haven't met Barry Pendergast, you have to. I believe he's 87 years old, previous architect, and he self-admits to having some Parkinson's. He daily uses the VR to help with some of his symptoms of the Parkinson's. And in the meeting with Unison, we talked about all of the seniors trying to live at home in an environment and being able to connect. Yes, there's a barrier to the hardware. However, if they're able to get together for coffee because it's snowing outside or because they can't get there physically, just that capability. Yeah, it's phone call works too, but getting in that immersive environment, they get a lot more social rich connection. So those are just a couple of examples that come to mind.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, Mike also put in the chat, and I think it kind of echoes what you mentioned, Brent, like the accessibility side of people who really can't get there, not just seniors, but anybody who has the accessibility barriers. They can go into that VR headset and experience that world without the limitations of a traditional user for the most part. That's why I was asking about the adaptive controllers, because then people feasibly, once those come to market more, even if they have more physical impairments, would still be able to be immersed in it. And I think from my experience talking with a few people who have adapted their mindset to VR, it's a little bit easier once you get past the barrier for VR by comparison to something like being on Zoom right now that we are, where you're in a physical room, you're looking at the screen, you're still in your own space, and it's a little bit harder to make that virtual space feel like a different space to get you into a separate mindset, whereas within VR you can't.
I can come close to this camera, but I'm not in your personal space. I dare you to go into VR world and not feel that personal space. You get that immersive environment is very, you start to grab those other elements like that, which is just amazing to feel.
Does it also have personal space bubbles? Like if you're in a VR coffee chat and there's somebody standing too close to you, do you tell somebody that you're too much in the personal space and walk away?
Well, I've broken some things because I've backed up from other people. We play mini golf, and all of a sudden the club came swinging around onto somebody's shoulder, and I backed up, and there went the coffee cup. So yeah, you that happens. There is consequences for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that is one thing I think that people need to be aware of is like if you're getting a VR headset for your own space, make sure you have an actual space that you're not hitting things. I remember when I was trying out Beat Saber, I ended up This was in like the corner of a friend's bedroom where they had their computer set up and they had bedposts, and I ended up whacking my arm almost full swing Beat Saber against their bedpost, and it hurt for a couple of days after that. That's what I like is now you can like draw where your area is. It tells you kind of where you're getting close to the edge, but you still need that physical space that you're not going to be intruded. A few other people who I've talked to have VR headsets and kids have had to go like, no, kids, you cannot come into this space, or struggling with pets, like they're having to lock their dog or whatnot in another room because they're playing the game, and otherwise the dog is running around in that space. So I think there's like those considerations in a home environment when you're looking at doing it. Whereas I think that's also relevant in the work environment too, where you want a dedicated space to be able to maybe do this, that you're at least obviously away from other people and not going to be hit by people walking by.
Right environment for the right situation, right? I mean, we meet in meta work rooms for a reason on Friday mornings. It's just a sit down meeting where we're all around a grand table, right? And or we could go into breakout tables, but we're stationary boundary. That's the word you use where it gives you that warning. But you're seated or seated, and that environment is specifically set up so that we can just talk. Right, it's not meant for motion. But there's another one that Lee likes to mention where he has video of it, and I will not. He shared it, but his daughter and his wife do not have the what is it called, where you get that motion sickness. So the game, to move as a bird, you need to take the controllers and you flap your arms very fast. The faster you go, faster you move. If you stop the controllers, put them back, you start going into a dive with head down. So another environment. They loved it. They had lots of space to do it in, though.
That sounds like Flappy Bird Extreme. Oh my.
So and just talking about the other environments. There's environments where you want to do the Zen out. You've got a busy day, middle of the day. You put on the VR headsets and you can sit on the top in a alpine resort in the top of the Swiss Alps. Snow coming down around you, little candles burning in your environment, nice soft music going on. I mean, you look at Asia and where they were with like the sleep rooms decades ago, and continuing on. Perfectly replicatable. You don't even need the cot. You could just be seated. I can't remember, what that word is, but in your office, and everybody else disappears, right?
Yeah, I remember one of the first VR demos I tried years ago. It was using an Acer headset at the Microsoft store. And they did that where they plunked you on top of a mountaintop and you had full immersion. And like it wasn't a high detailed model at the time, but it was enough where you could get the sense of being in a different environment and that sense of immersion there.
If you love taking meetings, one of the environments will put you up on a open, consider it the space station, but there's no top. So you're sitting there in a meeting room and you can look out over and see a real world picture of the Earth down below. That's just one, right? Totally different environment. Hopefully you don't have vertigo.
Yeah, because there is still that too. Like I still remember one of the experiences I had trying to play games in VR. I was playing Skyrim on the PlayStation VR, and the scariest thing was having the dogs attack me because the dogs would literally go and their mouths would like go after my face in VR. And when you're playing on a flat screen, it isn't necessarily that disorienting, but I had a nervous reaction to it. Like I knew it was VR. I was playing the game, but I was immersed enough, even though I was sitting in a seat, to feel that instinctive reaction to it that I just had to pause the game and take off the headset and take a moment out of it because it sometimes can be that profound with it. I know we're getting kind of close to the end of formal time. I still want to leave some time for casual talk time. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to ask questions on? Valerie, I think I saw you put on your camera. Did you have any questions there or anything to add?
No, thank you. Hi, everybody. I heard a presentation. It's amazing. I was in person. I see solution in my proper eyes. It's really amazing, and I like to recommend it. Hi, Chace.
Awesome. Thank you.
I have a
Yeah,
quick
welcome.
non-tech question for Chace. How large is the smart cities team?
Well, we're a relatively new team, so right now, I think we've got a couple. We've got our leader, who's Monique. We've got a couple program managers, and then I think we've got I think like was it five project managers at this point. So there's myself and Ross, and then like yeah, three others. So there's only like five of us at this point. But I know there's plans. Like the initial plan was to have a bigger team, but since we're still rather new and we're in that kind of experimentation kind of phase, and we're kind of looking to prove ourselves, there's definitely opportunity to potentially expand, right? So as momentum grows, and I fully expect, like, once we launch the technology integration center, as people start to go into that facility, they see things like drones and 3D printers and robots and the VR immersion room and augmented reality and AI. Like, it's just naturally we're going to get enough interest and enough ideas and projects that we're just going to have to actually expand at some point, right? Because we're not going to have the capacity ourselves to take on all this, right?
All right, thanks, and thanks again for the presentation as well.
All right. I haven't seen anything else in the chat pop up there recently, I don't think. There was a comment about how I don't need the controllers, I think, for the Quest, which you mentioned, Al. Can you turn it on and not tap those controllers together? Can you just do it with straight hands? Yeah, Brent, I see you're nodding there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
Cool.
you can. Yep.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else in chat there for questions. I don't see any.
I wanted to
other-
highlight, I put in the link for the VR AR Association from Europe. They ran in a couple hours, like Volvo, Lufthansa, like we're talking large organizations that are doing deep work on like real, this is what we want these headsets to accomplish in this business, right? And you look at how Lufthansa has, I think it's into the tens of thousands of training hours per year or per month. So when they talk about they're going deep into VR training, it literally like replicating what plane they're on, what make model, fire scenario, and flight attendants have to react to that, right? That's the kind of environment they're going to do in VR before they actually set a plane on fire and put them through the real world scenario.
Yeah, thanks for the example, Brent. Like, there's a lot of companies that are already starting to use this to great success. I think I even heard about Walmart using VR for training as well. So major companies that aren't just like traditional tech companies, but even main everyday large corporations.
Well, and think of how long it takes you to set up. And Chace gave the example of firefighters, right? Like you go to the southeast and you try and set up that environment with real fire or real environment. ER is often given as a health environment, right? So you can set it up, you can lay out all, what's the operating room going to do? Who's the doctor? What tools do they want? And boom, now it's all set up. And you then take the nurses through all that, their situation, and you say, okay, now hand me this, hand me this, hand me this. You do muscle memory, whatever you want to call it. That training is now three-dimensional, and how impressive that is, right? And it's like, oh, you made a mistake. Okay, let's go back, just like any artist from a singing point of view. Let's go to the top of, right, and boom, you can just reset to wherever you want.
And you're not using the actual space.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like a game. You can hit the reset button. You can go back to the beginning of the level, so to speak, start over. And I like for fire, I imagine there would still be a point where you'd want to still test in a real world scenario because you're not feeling the heat of real flames when you're in a VR situation. But at least it's that mediary stepping stone versus throwing somebody into the depth of that sort of anxious scenario so they can feel a little bit more confidence before they approach the real world training or then the real thing. Cool. Any last comments before we wrap up for this evening? No, not seeing anything. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brent. Thank you so much, Chace. Thank you so much for everybody else who was able to make it out or who was invited. It's really great to hear all the interesting work that's going on in all the different areas around Calgary and even further out that is impacting VR. Thank you to anyone who's watching the recording online. Really appreciate those who go back and take a look at it and get a little bit more detail in there. I'll be posting that up online hopefully within the coming weeks, as well as sharing out some of the links that were shared in chat there. And thank you so much, everybody. Hope you have a good evening or a good whatever rest of the time wherever you are when you're watching this, if it is on the recording there.
Thank you, Brent and Chace and Ross. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.